What's up, everybody? It's your boy Ryan, and this is the Thunder Channel. On Nootropics, thanks so much for watching. Welcome to another N20, which is Nootropics 20, where we talk about nootropics and all things biohacking for 20 straight minutes. Look, guys, specials on product. I know folks are trying to watch their spending during this time. I think President just extended the national guidelines to April 30th for a degree of social distancing, and some businesses to be essentially non-operational, among other things. So here's the deal. All of our products, we just did a blanket discount coupon code. 20% off everything at livecortex.com using the coupon code 20. That's it. One coupon code, 20% off of everything at livecortex.com. That is the Cortex stack. That is the Nootropics Masterclass. That is Nootropics Ground Zero. That is a 40-minute consult with me on nootropics. We're still doing those, and probably now might be a great time for folks to book one of those. That is the executive packages, business people that right now especially need extra brain performance and need to function really well. We've got consulting packages on that around nootropics and performance in general. The Viking testosterone protocol. Men, if you're chilling out, hanging out at home, now would be the time to be taking a very specific protocol to raise your testosterone. You want to be on top of this stuff. Everything is discounted using the coupon code 20. 20 takes 20% off everything at livecortex.com. All right, guys. So I got 12 awesome things that I want to talk about here, and we'll start with what is the best way to measure small amounts of noopept? Okay, so we've talked about this before, and there's a couple ways. The most primitive way, perhaps, would be to take a toothpick and then to wet a little bit of the end of the toothpick and then dip the toothpick inside of the noopept jar, and then you'll get micro amounts of noopept, and they can put it on the scale, watch the scale kind of go up, and there you can measure 5 milligrams of noopept or 8 milligrams of noopept using that strategy. And frankly, with a lot of stacks, adding noopept in at that dose makes a lot of sense, right? It's just a little infusion of noopept. Usually people are taking too much of that anyway, and it seems to work really well. The other more or less primitive strategy, the strategy that I use, and I think folks, if they have Swiss Army knives laying around, could use, is a Swiss Army knife. Take a Swiss Army knife and get one of those, find one of the blades that's very, very small. These are small blades, probably the size of like a pinky, and they're thin. You can pick the powder up very, very easily in very small amounts with thin Swiss Army knife blades and use it. That'd be my number one recommendation. If you don't have that, then sanitize a nail clipper that has the little nail file, which is also a small little blade, and use that. Sanitize it, wash it, or whatever, or go buy a new one specifically for that. Or somehow remove it from the thing and then add that to your tools within your sort of nootropics box. I don't know how people carry around their nootropics, but I have a bin, a small plastic bin, like where you move stuff, I don't even know how to explain it. It's a plastic big bin that people typically use for moving things or storing things. There's a fan inside of it, a small fan that keeps everything cool, and then a hole in the back for the cord for the fan, and that's where all my nootropics sit. So that's what I would say about that. Number 2, Ryan, is there a hack to increase libido when you already have high testosterone? Wow, good question. Yes, there is for most people. Not sure it'll work for you, but it should work for a lot of people. And I think that points out a couple things. You could have pretty high test and still have a libido problem. Usually that means you have a serotonin or dopamine problem. The fix, I don't know the specifics. I don't know if this is going to work for you, right? But what I would be doing is I'd be either consistently dosing for 2 weeks and then taking a 2-week break of 9 MEBC, somewhere around 20 milligrams or so, because you're restoring dopaminergic neurons in that case, among other things related to dopamine. And then the second thing that I would do as a hack to increase libido, if you already have high testosterone, would be to be taking 900 to 1,000 milligrams of a St. John's wort extract with somewhere around 0.3% of hypericin as the type of extract, because you have hyperforin and then you have hypericin. And what you're targeting is a serotonin receptor that mediates the reproductive organs' sexual response from the brain, if that makes any sense. So that's what I would target. So you're essentially targeting dopamine and serotonin, but doing it with 9 MEBC and or St. John's wort at pretty high doses in a very particular concentration. That's a great question. Next question, best mushroom nootropic mix. Man, good question. Well, I would say probably a couple hundred milligrams of cordyceps mushroom, 500 or so milligrams of chaga mushroom, and then you want a high dose like modafinil, something like 150 or 200 milligrams, and then bring in a sufficient dose of theanine in case that gets you a little too anxious. That's a high dose of pretty stimulant stuff, like 300 milligrams of theanine. To keep it very simple, that's what I would say. You've got chaga and cordyceps, so that covers your bases on having a lot of mushrooms in the mix. And then you've got high-dose modafinil and some theanine there. It's a very simple stack. It's only 4 compounds, and frankly, that's like one of the best combinations ever. It's something that I've been known to do, especially when I have a high volume of work to complete. That's kind of one of the stacks that I like to take. Ryan, so super long email, but basically the gist of it is, how do you differentiate from adrenal fatigue versus other fatigues? That's a good question. Well, so non-adrenal fatigue or non-adrenal hormone insufficiency, for those who are like, adrenal fatigue is not a real word, type of fatigue is well classified as CFS, and usually that is either someone had Lyme disease and now they're not testing positive for the bacteria that is present in Lyme disease. They had some other major viral infection like Epstein-Barr virus, and then they had mono for a considerable period of time. And then the immune system is still so you have no traces of active viral load or bacteria at that particular time, or now when you're testing, even though you're still having the fatigue, but you have, you're more than likely to be overexpressing immune function, if that makes sense. And the specific mechanism of, fatigue, I guess, would be excessive release of cytokines. So I guess back to the answer the question of how do you differentiate, you have to figure out whether or not you've had a virus recently or some sort of other similar insult. And the only way you do that is by testing. That separates the two. Knowing it's adrenal fatigue symptoms are like universally the same across the board, and they are, you urinate a lot, you can't hold on to water. In the morning, you wake up after 9 hours of sleep and do not feel energized. Your energy only starts to come back for a brief period around 6 to 8 p.m. So cortisol is obviously super jacked up. If you go and test these things, aldosterone, cortisol, antidiuretic hormone, usually low. Blood sodium, usually lower than it should be. Heart rate lower than it should be, and blood pressure lower than it should be. That's how you differentiate that. You'll have a hard time handling diuretics, anything that forces water out of your body. It's going to increase the fatigue essentially moments after you urinate, because you're going to lose a lot of water and a lot of salt in those situations, because the mechanisms that regulate that adrenal hormone insufficiency, those are adrenal hormones for the most part, with the exception of antidiuretic hormones. So that's what I would say on how you differentiate the two. Next point is sort of a cry for help. Ryan, I used to love racetams, and now they just make me anxious. What do I have to do? Should I cycle off, and for how long? So this is a case of a person who used to love racetams, so used to take a bunch of racetams and love them and therefore get a great effect from them. But now they just give them sort of an anxiety response, just like nothing else going on. No additional brain performance, no benefit in memory, no focus, verbal fluency, or motivation, just anxiety. What I would say happen is in this person's particular case, and if other people run into this, you took a certain racetam too long, too consistently, and you desensitized cholinergic receptors or AMPA receptors, or wherever the racetam was working on its action, glutamate receptors, in a way that makes it so that you're no longer going to be able to take that racetam unless you reverse the desensitization of the receptors. So the receptors have been desensitized or downregulated, and you've got to try to reverse that. The question is, how long do I cycle off? Sometimes never. I don't see this a whole lot, but I have certainly seen where people have effectively abused racetams, right? Like taken too many racetams too consistently without cycling, or taking the same racetam too consistently without cycling. And then it started to give them some sort of weird effect. And then they would cycle off for 2 months and come back and it'd be the same thing. They'd cycle off for 4 months and come back and it'd be the same exact thing. Like they just couldn't shake it. So usually, unfortunately, when you do that, there's not a cycle off period where the brain is going to go back to normal. And if there was, it'd be like a year or two. The way you can proactively approach it is you have to reverse the downregulation of the receptor site. And that gets very, very complex when you're talking about autoreceptors and regulatory inhibition receptors and all this kind of crap. So you've got to target the receptors to fix that particular problem. Ryan, quick question. Have you actually ever seen anyone have success with BPC 157 with an injury? I'm a bodybuilder and have basically a variety of injuries. I have an MMA friend who I train with, used to train with at the gym. And he had like I forget exactly what doctor diagnosed it as, but some substantial back problem, like the lower left part of his back. The dude would come in there and say hi to everybody and kind of like do some movements, but could not strike the bag or train. And I turned him on to BPC 157 and said, get the bacteriostatic water and see if you can inject it on site and let me know what you think. The guy was basically desperate to do anything. So I'm a biohacker. I have experience with this. I've done a lot of research on it. The guy did it, and within about 4 days, the pain, if on a scale from 1 to 10, was 8. Reduced down to about 3 or 4. Subsequently thereafter, he was actually able to just sort of recover on his own. He still took a break from the gym and then recovered on his own, and then he came back to the gym. He's like, dude, whatever you suggested, man, that stuff worked. He followed all the directions. People in the regular world have zero idea about biohacking. They're like, the dude's like, what? A peptide that I make in my gut that I can inject on site and it'll help? Yes, so I have seen success with BPC 157 in a real-time scenario. I've seen a couple of situations where people injected it on site and it fixed their issues. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Ryan, trying to save money because basically I was having a job problem related to COVID-19. What are some simple stacks to save money? Well, simple stacks. AACT stack, Google that and find that either on our YouTube channel here or at livecortex.com. That's Alcar, alpha GPC, caffeine, theanine. Somewhere around 300 milligrams of Alcar, 75 to 150 milligrams of GPC, 100 to 200 of caffeine, and then 100 to 200 of theanine. And I give ranges so that folks can find their sweet spots within those ranges. The AACT stack is very simple. It's a 4-compound stack. That's why it's awesome. Alternatively, Alcar, theacrine together, that's it. Just those 2 compounds. 300 to 500 of Alcar, 100 to 200 of theacrine is a very, very energizing, work-inducing, motivation kind of stack, and it's simple. It's simple, and you're really not talking about high quantities. Most like Alcar containers, like if you get one from Nootropics Depot, like you have a lot of Alcar in that container. And theacrine, it comes usually in small containers, but honestly, it's a heavier powder, so 100 milligrams seems to require actual less visible material than other compounds like perhaps aniracetam, which is very fluffy in its powder form. And then lastly, I would say simple stacks: modafinil in the dose that works well for you, aniracetam in a medium dose. So take your regular dose and just cut it in half of aniracetam. CDP choline in 85 to 150 milligrams. Again, find your spot. And that would be another stack. And then alternatively, chaga and Alcar. Chaga mushroom and Alcar. 500 of chaga, 300 of Alcar would be my suggestion there. Dial in as necessary. So back to 9-MEBC. Check this out. This is an anecdotal on somebody that we're working with on a consulting basis. This is a business person. It's a venture capitalist who owns a couple companies and is a busy person. Hasn't had libido for quite some time, but still has high test. So back to kind of one of the things we talked about before. 2 weeks on 9-MeBC, 25 milligrams a day, libido was back. And I figured this would be an interesting thing to talk about to explain why. So 9-MeBC is restoring dopaminergic neurons, particularly in the midbrain and the hippocampus, to get specific for those of you wondering. It's also increasing neurotrophic factors, so BDNF, NGF, very important in trying to fix a particular area that might be wrong with the brain that could have to do with libido signaling. And again, dopaminergic and serotonergic functionality is highly dependent on good libido. The other interesting thing that I'm theorizing might be happening in this particular case is that 9-MeBC prevents the formation of neurotoxic substances. So that in the literature, it's a little unclear, but we could be talking about lipofuscin buildup, or I don't know, I mean, otherwise toxic substances. And maybe someone's taking a supplement that they're dosing way too high, and that ends up being neurotoxic. But 9-MeBC is preventing the formulation of essentially clusters of toxicity among neurons. The one thing I will say, because look, it's a new compound and folks are really excited about it, and trust me, so am I with 9-MeBC, is that looking at the mechanisms, I mean, I don't have any proof of this. I would say if you're not careful with it and you consistently dose it, like for a month or two straight at high doses, you could run into dopamine neurotoxicity, and you do not want to do that. You do not want to go down that route. Aside from that, it's like doom and gloom recommendation there. Yeah, 9-MeBC I've seen for a handful of people get their libido functioning back, even in the presence of high testosterone. So I think that's really, really cool. Okay. The next point is a point that I want to make. So a lot of people come into the nootropics forums and even the nootropics subreddit and ask the question, I'm suffering from mental fatigue, which nootropic should I take? And I just want to be clear for folks. You have to understand that no recommendation, so people are then going to give a blanket of suggestions, right? A bunch of suggestions. And then you're going to have to experiment with all those suggestions and find what might randomly work. You're never going to know the mechanism if you take that route or approach with that strategy. And you should understand the mechanism of your fatigue. Always when you have a fatigue issue that's pretty pronounced, not just like, oh, I'm tired, I didn't sleep well. It's a different thing when you have fatigue syndrome. It's a very debilitating fatigue. There's always a physiological reason for that. There's always a basis in your physiology for why you're fatigued. And you must, I repeat, you must do the diligence, the research, and spend the time figuring out what that mechanism or mechanisms are. And sometimes, there could be multiple different mechanisms. Again, with CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, that is not adrenal hormone mediated or otherwise like thyroid hormone mediated or something, but that is viral related. Usually it's an overreaction from your immune system and a storm of cytokines that makes you feel very fatigued. Or it's some other, I mean, there are virus experts in virology that still do not have a grasp on what the autoimmunity or immune function issue is after somebody gets Epstein-Barr virus and has a long stint with mono, and then the active EBV tests say that there are no active EBV infections, but they still feel fatigued. Doctors for a while were saying it's all psychological. Obviously that's bullshit. It's real. People really have symptoms. In that case, your immune system is overreacting. So I just want to make that clear. If there's fatigue that you have that's pronounced, there is a physiological reason, and you've got to dig deep into your physiology and the research to figure that out. Ryan, best way to save racetam powder? Good question. I would say low dose on like 3 racetams at a time, right? So as an example, you might try something like 300 milligrams of aniracetam, 300 of oxiracetam, and like 5 milligrams of coliracetam. Take your choline source as usual and be on your way. That's the best way to do it, because instead of just taking a gram of aniracetam and getting the effect that it does, you're sort of working on a couple different things by taking different racetams, and you're doing it in low doses, but the sum total of those medium or small doses acts as essentially a regular dose. But in the end, you kind of get the safe pattern because you're not just dosing a gram at a time of something. Sticking with compounds that require less doses for things, like coliracetam, like pramiracetam, like fasiracetam, if you respond particularly well to that, and even like phenylpiracetam would be the strategy there. All right, last question on the N20. Ryan, would red light therapy be effective if you're sick but you haven't tested for COVID-19 for lung capacity? Good question. Okay, so what this person is asking is, yeah, would you be able to shine an infrared red light on your chest, around your lungs, if you feel like maybe you're having some breathing issues or something, or you're sick but you don't have breathing issues, but you're trying to prevent essentially the pneumonia that comes with COVID-19, because COVID-19 is just a wicked respiratory virus. Would that help? I would say that, first I want to say, I don't know the answer to that question, right? I can't tell you that is something you should do as an official recommendation. You guys understand that, right? But I would say you just have to sort of look at the mechanism of red light therapy, which is increased ATP and blood flow around the area, which usually does foster a degree of, some degree of healing or some degree of extra hormone production. Like shining red lights on the testicles if you're a male will improve your sperm motility and increase your testosterone. So theoretically, the answer would be theoretically maybe. Theoretically, maybe that would help in that situation. As an anecdotal, I've seen all kinds of weird things with red light therapy. Obviously, testosterone. I've seen people that have had undiagnosable fatigue, undiagnosable from doc, because doc is really bad with chronic fatigue syndromes, have relief from their fatigue by shining a red light on their chest. Like, what the hell is going on there? Like, right? What the hell is going on? Are they optimizing and closing tight junctions in the intestines because they have intestinal permeability, and that somehow is preventing endotoxins from releasing into their blood and traveling across the blood-brain barrier to their brain, and then they're feeling better? I don't know. Like, we don't know. But there's a lot of really interesting stuff that people have been able to accomplish by shining red lights, infrared 660 nanometer, near 800 plus far red lights on their bodies for a variety of ailments. That is like next frontier in a lot of things. Already pretty effective for testosterone. So that's what I would say about that. But again, I'm not a doctor, and though I am very versed in many things physiology, it's just not something that I can officially say to people. I don't want to be like on the news, like, look, YouTube biohacker says he has solution for things. Okay, you guys understand, okay? And that's it. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Look, I know it's been a rough little couple weeks, and I understand that Trump just extended the guidelines for effectively a similar type of distancing socially. And I know that has an impact on the economy. Well, obviously has an impact on the economy, but I know that it has an impact on your guys' jobs and your guys' businesses. So, I created a blanket discount coupon code. It's the coupon code 20 at livecortex.com, and it gets you 20% off everything on the website. Every single thing on the website is 20% off. And for those of you that are business folks and executives and want to get the 6-month package, that takes $1,000 off of that package. Think about that. That's pretty substantial. It takes money off the Cortex stack. It takes money off the Nootropics Masterclass. It takes money off of Nootropics Ground Zero, which is the new course we launched, video course, 1-hour video course, taking you from Ground Zero, brand new, to Nootropics, to the pro level. That's the 3-year mark in using Nootropics. Takes money off consults with me, Nootropics consults, gut consults, chronic fatigue consults, adrenal fatigue consults. Takes money off the testosterone protocol. The Viking testosterone protocol is a stud of a program to raise your test. And if you use the coupon code 20, it takes 20% off the Viking testosterone protocol. Every other one of our products is 20% off right now using the coupon code 20. Go get some nootropic products. Now is the perfect time to up your game, get some information, get some of the courses. Nootropics Ground Zero is insane. The reviews are sick. Book a consult with me. Those of you who need help on nootropic, go book a consult right now, livecortex.com. Make sure you use the coupon code to save some money. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. More content coming this week. We'll talk to you next time.